Hey guys, welcome back to this week's live stream. Um, Before I start, anybody who's going to be joining the chat or either watching the playback, could you please let me know just by commenting if you are getting notifications? I don't think that, I think for some reason, the notifications are not going out to my subscribers. So if you are not getting notifications, could you please let me know? Um, Last week, I think it was kind of odd that I didn't see anyone in the chat, and I'm wondering if that is because the notifications are not going out. So if you are not getting notifications, please either type it in the comments, or if you're going to be joining the chat, please just let me know in the chat whether or not you are receiving notifications. And please bear with me because I'm not feeling the greatest, but I am here about a half an hour late. There was some issues earlier for some reason. YouTube was not allowing me to go live. I don't know what that was about, but I'm here. And I just want to thank everyone who will be joining in to the conversation tonight. It will be a very, very important conversation. So, I advise everyone to join or either watch the playback later on. Excuse me. I know right now a lot of people are talking about the abortion bans that are coming to the forefront now, especially in light of the situation that is going on in Alabama right now, where their governor just approved the bill that basically restricts all forms of abortion. I believe, excuse me, I believe the only acceptable form of abortion under that bill will be for if it is going to cause some type of harm to the mother's life. There is no exceptions for rape or incest, which I find to be repulsive. I don't understand why anyone would think it would be acceptable for someone to have to bear the burden of bringing a child into the world under those circumstances. And, that's not what we're here to talk about right now. But I did want to just take a brief moment to speak on that. I know that it has a lot of people in an uproar right now. But as I always say, our issues that are specific to our community, I feel even if that bill does not pass, because it obviously is going to be going to the Supreme Court, because people feel that it's definitely not constitutional. It's violating all sorts of rights, and the battle has already begun with that. So, I feel personally, whether or not that bill is going to pass, the issues that impact my community will still exist one way or another. And something that the premise of our conversation tonight, I really wanted to speak upon a situation in an article that I came across that I found to be very telling. And what the article was addressing was the fact that by 2053, financial analysts are projecting that the Black community, African American community, I'll say Black community because usually there's no separation of people of different, of various cultural backgrounds. Everyone pretty much here, regardless of cultural background, if you're Black, 9 times out of 10, you'll be identified as African American. So it's projecting that by 2053, the African American community will have 0% wealth. You heard me correctly. 0% wealth by the year 2053. I find that to be quite staggering. I find it to be quite telling that, so many people are counting us out. So many people feel as if we're regressing instead of progressing. And based on the data, um, unfortunately, that is what is coming down the pike. And, it's very troubling to me. Um, I will shed more light on how I feel about this. But first, I want to read this article because, it's it sheds light on, pulling the veil off of, this whole thing of people feeling as if there's some type of wealth within our community that is going to sustain us in the coming future. And, I just do not see that happening unless we make some drastic changes. And I'll get into that in a minute. But quickly, I'm just going to type something in the chat to see if it's working, because that's one of my concerns. I don't know if the chat function is working. Okay, I just put something in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this article. And it's coming to us courtesy of ebony.com, Ebony, the magazine. And it says a new report from the Institute of Policy Studies indicates a bleak future for the wealth of Black Americans. The road to zero wealth, how the racial wealth divide is hollowing out America's middle class. Reports that median wealth among Black Americans will be $0 by the year 2053. The Guardian notes the country's overall negligence in improving the financial state of Black Americans following slavery, compiled with the housing discrimination that took place thereafter, is the underlying cause for the report's findings. And I want to stop right there for just 1 second, because a lot of times we hear people saying that Black people, African Americans, whatever you want to call it, they say that there's no progress being made within our communities because we're just not motivated to do better. And that is 100% false. There's plenty of Black people that are working very hard every day to try to accomplish something for themselves and their families, within this system. And according to this article and many other people who just have basic common sense, based on the analytical data, as well as what we can just see with our own eyes and what a lot of us experience within our daily lives, structural racism is the primary cause of the wealth gap, and how they can even come up with these projections that by 2053, there will be absolutely no wealth within the Black community. And, there may be some people that want to point to a select few. We're not talking about celebrities and people like that. They are in a completely different category than the average everyday person. Therefore, they're not even factored into this because many times they don't even reside within the communities in which, these articles are referring to. Okay, so I just wanted to make that distinction because a lot of people like to say that, structural and institutional racism has absolutely nothing to do with the conditions of the Black community, and that's 100% false. People who have taken the time to study these situations, they all come up with basically the same outcome. So therefore, people who speak upon this, they're not just making this up. That is a huge part of the problem as to why Black society has not been able to make strides in the way that that we could. So it goes on to say, the study itself also points to mass incarceration and a tax system only benefiting the rich as other crucial factors for the drop, which we'll start to see as early as 2020. By 2020, median Black and Latino households stand to lose nearly 18% and 12% of the wealth they held in 2013, respectively, while median white household wealth increases by 3%, the report reads. At that point, just 3 years from now, white households are projected to own 86 times more wealth than Black households and 68 times more wealth than Latino households. Another reason for the drastic decline to take place is the 2001 recession. Unfortunately, home values don't come back in the same way in Black communities when things happen. Baltimore financial coach and advisor Althea Saunders Raynard told The Guardian. Asante Muhammad, one of the report's authors, said there's an antidote to the drastic wealth disparity in communities of color. You find first generation, even second generation African American and Latino households that have professional jobs and are making middle income money, but they have the wealth of a white high school dropout. Okay, let me pause right there. Did you hear what I said? You find first generation and second generation African American and Latino households that have professional jobs and are making middle income money, but they have the wealth of a white high school dropout. That is profound. So basically, what this is stating is that individuals within the African American and Latino community, and make no mistakes, the African American community is on the bottom of that totem pole, even beneath the Latino community. And it is horrible because we've been in this country since the inception of this country. And, for an individual to be in a professional job and making middle income money and still have the same wealth as a white high school dropout is very telling of how the system is structured to provide privileges to certain individuals and to deny others of those privileges. This is facts. This has nothing to do with how I feel. This has nothing to do with whether or not I want to complain about the situation. This is just the reality of what is going on. This is the reality of what is happening. And, we have to begin to take these things a lot more seriously. Um, you know, I get up here every week and I bring the information to the community because I feel that it is relevant for us to know what is going on. I know that there are so many distractions out there that keeps us from paying attention to what is happening in the real world. Hi, Ms. Sarquay. Thank you for joining. I know that there's so many things that can keep us distracted. And, I'm not saying this to condemn anyone or to make anyone feel that, they are less than because they may not be privy to the things that are going on. That is why myself and others are here for as long as we're able to put out the information so that you can be aware of what is going on. I don't know if you understand how critical that is, that based on the current climate of what is happening in the Black community economically, that individuals can come to the conclusion that by the year 2053, and let's be clear, many of us will still be alive in the year 2053. We may be up in age, but we will definitely still be alive. Our children will be adults at that time. And a lot of this stuff, if we don't do something quickly, I'm talking about within the next 5-year span, if we don't do something, our children will inherit this great burden of 0% wealth within this society. I have my own opinions about what I feel. I'm a very strong proponent of nation building. I know that is something that is far out and beyond what many people believe or think can happen. I strongly feel that if we come together and we put all of our skills and resources together, that we will be able to build something for ourselves so that we won't have to worry about being economically disenfranchised by a system that for some reason is just hell bent on marginalizing us. Danielle Gandy says, "Hey Shelly, I'm late, but I'm here. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you will be able to get something out of tonight's discussion." Um, I'm gonna get back to the chat in a second. I just want to finish the last couple of lines of this article. So Muhammad goes on to say, they're not truly part of a middle class, which could mean financial stability, money to weather challenging economic situations, or money to invest in the economic opportunities of their children. So what this young lady is saying is basically that Black people, by and large, do not have enough wealth to even pass anything on to their children. There's no generational wealth that we will be able to pass down so that our children will not be faced with the burden of being in a situation that they could possibly be dealing with 0% wealth for their families. This is absolutely devastating, and as I continue to say, you know, no matter how big or how small the audience, I'm going to continue to spread these messages because, you know, there's a whole world happening around us, and we are on the bottom of the barrel scraping for scraps in an economy that, by and large, excludes us from the conversation. And what I really would wish that a lot of us would stop doing is putting so much of our trust and our faith into politicians that continue to lie to us every election cycle and bring nothing forward. We have ADOS, that they're pushing for reparations. I'm not totally against it. I do have some concerns about some of the things that the leaders of ADOS are saying. The more and more I follow that movement, I'm a little bit discouraged by some of the divisiveness that I'm seeing coming from it. But all in all, I do feel that reparations is something that is needed. I do feel that reparations is something that is owed, and I won't disparage them from continuing their fight and doing what it is that they feel that they have to do. But what I will also say about that is we definitely cannot put all of our eggs in one basket. There's absolutely no way that we can be completely banking on reparations as our saving grace to get out of these situations. There is enough wealth that we have collectively. We may not have a lot of wealth individually, but right now, as we speak, we have enough wealth collectively where we can actually start some communalism, where we can actually, go to these places where we can get cheap real estate and we can begin to build something for ourselves where we don't have to deal with so much of this discrimination. It's very crippling to us when we're trying to integrate or assimilate ourselves into these societies that by and large do not want us. And I think that's a very harsh reality that we're going to have to face. We're integrated into a system that basically had to be forced to accept us. Now we're all here, trying to coexist within a system that at the end of the day does not have our best interests in mind. Now, I understand we are still within the confines of American society, but as we can see, excuse me, with other groups of people, I'll use the Chinese community as an example. They're very tight knit community. They have a lot of businesses among each other. They have their own banks. They have, financial institutions in place, and they practice communalism so that they will be able to build one another up, to help one another. And, by and large, I don't really see the Chinese community, um, you know, having to face so much of the economic burden as other so-called minority communities. I don't identify as a minority. I don't want to be meshed in with other individuals that don't face the same challenges that my community face. But for the sake of this conversation, I'll say other minority communities. The Chinese community is considered as a minority community. However, they're not mentioned in this report. And why is that? They're not mentioned in this report to be spiraling downward economically because they have their own economic system in place within their communities. They hold one another up. Um, do I feel capitalism is the best way to go about doing things? Actually, I don't. I do not 100% support capitalism, but I'm not going to be naive to the fact that I live in a system and I live within a society that is run based off capitalism. And I feel that, that is the reason why we see so much detriment happening within our community, because capitalism needs, a group of people to feed off of. They need a group of people to be on the bottom of the totem pole so that, others can elevate themselves above that group. Am I advocating for other groups to be on the bottom of the totem pole? No, I'm not. What I'm saying is we simply need to do what we have to do as a community to pull ourselves up out of the mud and, out of the situations that are coming if we don't do something to secure a future for ourselves and for our families and our children, and so on and so forth. you know this is not a game. And I think that a lot of people, they much rather bury their head in the sand than to deal with the very real situations that are happening. Having 0% wealth is basically, you know asking to go and just silently die. We have to come to the realization that there's no one coming to save us. I think that a lot of people get into the mindset that eventually things will work themselves out. No, if we don't put in the work, nothing will change. And that's something that we have to come to grips with. If we don't put in the work, then who will? You have people that don't even want to be within the same system with you, and they do everything to keep you marginalized. So to think that they're going to come and help you is very naive, and is pretty much delusional, quite frankly. So I'm peeking back in the chat, and Miss Arquay says they will ruin it. They always have. I'm not quite sure what you mean by they will ruin it. Are you referring to us? Are you referring to people outside of our community? If you want to go ahead and reply in the chat and let me know what you mean by they will ruin it, they always have. Um, if you are referring to forces outside of our community, I agree. In the past, you know, we have built several things, excuse me, we have built very affluent communities where we had businesses, we had our own schools, we had our own hospitals. You know, things were looking up in many instances. Things were looking up. They were on an upward. They were going upward. Um, During segregation, a lot of those things. I won't even say segregation. Even before that was so-called the law of the land, even before that, some of these towns were targeted because they were so successful. So that is something that, we have to be aware of, that, it's a possibility that these things, could happen. But I think that we're going to have to be focused on what it is that we have to do in order to survive. We don't have the luxury of we really don't have the luxury of thinking about what someone could do to us. We need to be forward thinking and worrying about what we're going to do in order to get ourselves out of these situations, because 0% wealth, like I said, that's basically saying, go somewhere and just quietly die. Um, Miss Arquay responded and she said, speaking of us building our communities, the way it was when we had Black Wall Street. Yeah, as I was saying about the many prosperous communities that we had, some of them, just a few years post slavery, we owned millions of acres of land. We had businesses. We had our own towns with, all Black government, all, sheriffs, police, the whole nine yards. And like I said, things were looking on the up and up for a while. And unfortunately, people who were who were jealous and who found, mean spirited and hateful, they found a way to maneuver themselves into the neighborhood, many times under false allegations, um, and use that as an excuse to come in and wreak havoc within the communities. And as I was saying, that's something that we have to keep stored in our head. But I don't think that we should be discouraged by that. We have to be forward thinking, we have to be progressive thinking, and we have to just do what it takes to be able to sustain ourselves and build something for the future generations that will follow us. Many times I think, what would have happened, or where would we be today if we would have rejected integration? I know a lot of people feel that integration worked for us, but I'm going to read an insert from an article in a minute that says otherwise. Because while we feel that we made strides by integrating into white society, what that did was that destroyed the Black economy that was pretty progressive within this country. We basically handed over our economics to a group of people that despised us. And I'm not saying this to disrespect the ancestors, I'm not saying this to disparage their fight. All I'm saying is that it's a new day, and we have our own plight, and we have our own struggle that we're going to have to overcome. And that's something that I really think about a lot, because people, they like to say that it brought the country together, but honestly speaking, as we can see with a lot of the things that are going on, it really wasn't that big of an improvement for us. And actually, in some areas, especially economically, it hurt us greatly. There may be a little bit of social benefits to it, but then I can't even necessarily 100% stand by that because as we can see, there's still so much brutality that is taking place that you would think once, we decided to integrate and we said that we were going to make steps in the right direction, that's what was put on paper. A lot of things still fail to change. And as a result of that, we're dealing with the fallout of a complete failure. Honestly speaking, integration was a failure. And the reason it was a failure is because I personally feel, and based on a lot of the things that we're just seeing happening in society today, that didn't really bring people together. They were forced by law to have to integrate with one another. And that's why I feel like it was a mistake because by and large, it was not a genuine decision for people in the dominant society. I don't feel it was a genuine decision for them to go ahead and say, what is happening in this country is wrong. And we're going to go ahead and merge the societies genuinely and in hopes that this will change the social status of the country. And unfortunately, in many ways, that did not happen. And as a result of that, as I was saying, we're dealing with a lot of what we're dealing with today. So, it's just very it's very troubling to me. And I do the very best I can to try to filter some of the things that I really want to say, because YouTube is on a rampage right now with shutting down channels, with their algorithms of how you basically can't even mention the word white or black. You can't talk about racism. You can't, it's so many filters on what you can and cannot say. But certain things I just absolutely cannot be silent about because my community is in trouble. And I think that a lot of people are in denial about that. Turn the television off and stop looking at celebrities on TV living the glamorous lifestyle, because that is not true for the majority of the people in our community. As you just seen in that article, a Black person who has a professional job has the same amount of wealth as a white high school dropout. That is astonishing. And I think that everyone should be shocked. I won't say shocked, but I think everyone should be paying attention to that. And everyone should be doing the best that they can to figure out how to not make that a reality, because that's something that is very real. Um, I'm glancing at the chat, and Miss Arquay says, every time we do our own thing, they destroy it. The nerve of us to want something from the country we built. I totally agree with that. Um, a lot of times people tell us that we need to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. You hear that all the time. That's one of Fox News' favorite talking points, that we need to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. And if we want something, we need to stop begging and we need to just go ahead and do it. And as we've already been discussing throughout this conversation, post-slavery, we're talking about a very short time after slavery, within a few years, Black society was doing very well. And I highly encourage everyone to do some studying on Reconstruction, because after slavery, during Reconstruction, we were starting to come together and build forward moving communities, distribute the wealth among each other. And people did come in and seek to destroy it. But like I was saying, at this point, we are in we are at a point where we have to do whatever it takes for us to be able to survive. What is coming toward us. We cannot allow ourselves to be in a situation where our children are going to be in dire poverty. We cannot allow that to happen. Lily J says it's sad. So what do we do about this point? In a minute, I'm going to get into some of the things I feel that we can do in the short term to combat this, because like I said, this is what's going on in the real world. There's a lot of things out there to distract us and, to keep our eyes off of the things that are actually going to have a real impact on our lives. But, like I said, the things that we're discussing tonight are the things that are going on, and is definitely part of the reality for many African American people in this country. Like I said, there's the chosen few that have plenty of wealth, and it's very staggering to me that we're not seeing a lot of these people that have left the community to go on and have wealth, individual wealth. It's very staggering to me that many of these people don't come back and contribute much of anything to the communities in which they come from. It's very disheartening and it's very sad. But I don't really look to celebrities to be our saviors. It would be nice if they did actually care enough about their communities to aggregate their wealth and build something that will have lasting effects to provide wealth for our communities. But unfortunately, there's only a handful of them that actually do that. And I'm not trying to disrespect anyone, but I'm talking about real real financial institutions and real things that can help our people sustain themselves. It's so sad to me that within our communities there isn't a single black owned fully black owned and controlled school. There isn't and I'm talking about without any type of government influence, because there are some Afrocentric schools, but a lot of them are depending on government funds in order to operate. And I feel as if you're depending on a system that only, allows you to get to a certain point and only allows you to say certain things and only allows you to teach certain things. I feel as if that is not, providing the best. I don't feel that that will have the best outcome for our community, because you're pretty much filtered on what you can and cannot do. So, as I was saying, it's very disheartening to me that there isn't, these institutions that are required in order for us to have the type of wealth that it is that we need to be able to survive. No hospitals, no fully owned and controlled Black schools, very few banks, a handful of banks that many of us don't even patronize. Um, and I'm not coming down on anybody, but I do think that we need to begin to look into supporting the institutions that we currently have. For example, um, seeking out Black owned banks for us to put our money into, so that we will be able to come to the table and negotiate for loans and other things that can be used to build things within the community. We have to begin to get very, very smart about what it is that we're spending our money on and how we're going to go about doing things, because 2053, as I stated, is not that far away when you do the math. I'm back in the chat, and Miss Harquay says, I'm curious to know what you think about the abortion laws coming out. Um, you know something? When I started the video, I did a little spiel on the abortion laws, and I I don't mind speaking briefly on that again. Excuse me. How I feel about the abortion laws. I feel that I don't really know how I feel about abortion. I can't say I'm for it or against it. Um, I, as many people, I feel that people are going to do what it is they feel that they have to do for their own personal life. I think it's crazy that a bunch of men would be sitting on a board and saying what a woman should be doing, you know, with her body. And, there's just so many things that's tied to these abortion laws that are hypocritical, because a lot of the people that claim to be pro-life, they don't even bat an eye to the people, especially within our community, that are being murdered and slaughtered with this ongoing genocide on a daily basis. A lot of them don't bat an eye to that. They do not pass legislation to say police brutality is wrong. So it's very confusing to me how you're so much pro-life when you don't even care about the people living right on the side of you right now. Um, Another thing that I feel about this is that I don't think that this is really something that is targeted towards the African American community, and I'm going to tell you why. The African American community does not have a declining birth rate. The white or Caucasian community, whatever you want to say, they have a declining birth rate. They are not having enough children to replace themselves, and they are afraid of it going extinct. And this is a reality. There's several reports out there that explains and details how white society is on a numerical downward spiral as far as replacing themselves. So I think that a lot of these abortion laws that we're seeing coming into place is trying to combat combat that issue, because they're going to be the minority in this country pretty soon. So I would advise for people to do some research on that, because a lot of these people are hypocrites, and they're not really pro-life. They just don't want to be extinct. And um, I don't mean to say it so harsh, but that's just the reality of what it is. They're trying to prevent being the minority in this country, and they're doing it by hook or crook. They're basically forcing women to have babies, regardless of if they've been raped, regardless of if it's incest. It's so many insidious things that are happening with these abortion laws. And I just feel as if um like I said in the beginning, I don't know if these things are going to you know uh if they're going to be repealed or whatever. But as I was stating, regardless of whether or not abortion laws are passed or repealed or whatever, our community is still dealing with so many issues. you know um One of our most pressing issues within our community. I'm just going to be very honest about that, because despite popular belief, Black women are not having all these appeal, that if that was the case, that Black women were the one having the majority of the abortions, I honestly feel that no one would bat an eye and no one would care. Those Republican lawmakers wouldn't care. So, that's just a little brief spill on my outlook about the abortion laws. I feel that people are very, very hypocritical, and I feel that this won't end well, and I feel that it's a total disaster. And I think that if people are going to claim to be pro-life, they need to be pro-life all across the board. As I was stating, people are being gunned down in the streets every day. There's, uh, they're not making any strict laws against that loss of life. So I personally in the chat, the uber rich do not give back to us. My cousin is trying to do it in Texas. Look up the Village United in Keelan, Texas. Oh, I'll definitely look into that. I am always looking to connect with people that are doing things to uplift our community, to see, if there's any way that I can help or get involved. I'm kind of far away from Texas, but you know, I'm always looking to see who is, doing things to help uplift our community. Touch on before I close out. Miss Arquette also says he is making a lot of noise out there. That is amazing, and I'm very happy to hear that we are not just sitting on our hands, and some of us are out there putting in work. Another thing I wanted to touch on briefly before I close out, I was saying just a little while ago my thoughts on integration, and how I feel in many ways it failed. I think essentially what we got instead of integration, which would be two societies coming together to uplift one another and move forward together, white people extracted all of the wealth from the Black community because many of the Black businesses closed, many of the Black institutions, shut down. And what we ultimately ended up getting was assimilation and terror. Um, we assimilated into a system that in many ways, um, made us denounce our Blackness to make another segment of the country feel comfortable. And we're seeing remnants of that continuing to play out today, where a lot of us don't have any pride within our own race, where a lot of us, we want to be anything but what we are. We'll go out of our way to disparage our own community to try and gain favor from the more, I guess you could say, the more dominant community within the social construct. And that's very sad to me because I know what our potential is. And I know that unfortunately, we are integrated into a system and we're dealing with individuals who are tolerating us by and large. And, I don't want anyone to, what I know mine, um, I don't want people to get in their feelings because they may have friends from other societies or they may have loved ones from other societies. I think that what we need to do is we need to take our emotion out of the situation and we need to be logical. We need to ask ourselves, what have we gained by integrating into a society that does not have our best interests at heart? And I think that's something that we really need to think about, because I don't think that we actually take the time to sit back and see what we gain collectively as a community. I'm not talking about individuals because a lot of them are okay. But as I just stated to you could be on a professional job and there could be a white person that dropped out of high school that's in the same um, wealth group with you. And that's something that should scare you. That's something that should compel you to want to change the entire infrastructure of how things are being done and how we are communicating with one another. Um, I think that's something that we really, really need to think about. But another thing that I wanted to touch on is the fact that excuse me, is the fact that, as I was stating a moment ago, unfortunately, a lot of people from the dominant society, they are tolerating us. They're tolerating us because the law says that they have to. And I know many people may want to disagree with me, but if you just take a look around, you can go into any of these social media platforms, and I'm telling you, you will see what people feel within their hearts and minds, because they are in the comfort of their own homes and they can say what they truthfully feel without repercussions. And the stuff that I see is absolutely it's absolutely disgusting, but I'm not shocked by it, because as I continue to say, we are in a society that is tolerating us. I feel by and large, there was no sincerity when it came to integration. It's not something that, the mass majority of people wanted. So I'm going to take a quick look in the chat before I read this passage that further proves my point. Forward Movement says integration didn't fail; it did exactly what it was supposed to do: hoodwink us. Yeah, I guess that's another way to look at it. It did exactly what it intended to do, which was to give us a false sense of, I guess, a false sense of inclusion. Um, and to a certain degree, there was certain little carve outs and little trinkets that were given to us to make us feel that there was some progress that was trying to be made. But if you do the research, you will see that so many of those civil rights laws have been scaled back to the point where they're almost non-existent. And that's another thing, that someone made a very valid point about. I can't remember right now whose live stream I was watching, but they pointed out the fact that when the Civil Rights Act was passed and the laws were passed, there wasn't a time frame put on how long these things would have to stay in place. So little by little, like I was saying, you begin to see these laws and these rights being scaled back or distributed to minority groups. That's why I say that is a very dangerous term, because when you say minority, that's a very blanket statement, and it does not specifically state Black people. So when a lot of the resources are handed out, they say, well, we gave something to the minority community, and a lot of people are, they're tricked by that, because they feel that when they say minority, they're speaking about Black people. And many times they're not. They use that as a trick bag to make you think that they're doing something for Black people. And, once they finish handing out all the resources to the other minorities, Black people are the last on the list. So I think that's something that we need to take into account, and we need to be very observant about these words that are passed around, that makes it appear that Black people are in the conversation, but many times they're not. Now, this last point I want to make, I want to expand on the point I was making about Black people more so being tolerated than actually accepted genuinely. This article is titled, "It's Mostly White People Who Prefer to Live in Segregated Neighborhoods." And the article goes on to say, this article is from a few years back, but it's very relevant, because I always say that, in many cases, the only thing that changed was the date on the calendar, because we're still seeing a lot of these mindsets continue to live on throughout generation to generation. So it goes on to say, in today's New York Times, David Leonhardt discusses a new study showing that middle income white and Asian Americans tend to live in middle class neighborhoods, while middle income Black Americans tend to live in poorer ones. The article was published just as the U.S. Supreme Court narrowly upheld the federal government's power to fight housing discrimination, and is a reminder that racial segregation remains a powerful force in shaping the American metropolises. It goes on to say, but Leonhardt also repeats one unfounded and damaging counter to explain segregation's origins. Of course, the neighborhood gap arises in part from voluntary choices, Leonhardt writes. Many Americans of all races prefer to live among people who are similar to them. For African Americans, such a choice oftentimes means living in lower income areas given the racial disparity in incomes. This notion is a popular one, that people like to live among their own, but it's highly misleading because research has shown that it is far more true for white Americans than for Black Americans. In a 2009 study by the University of Illinois, a Chicago sociologist, Maria Creason, and other scholars published in the American Journal of Sociology found, given a choice, all of white, 60% white, and 40% Black, or all Black, white said the all white neighborhoods were most desirable. The independent effect of racial composition was smaller among Blacks, and Blacks identified the racially mixed neighborhoods as most desirable, along with all Black neighborhoods. And it isn't so much that whites want to live among people who are similar to them, Christian and her co-authors write, but whether that anti-Black feelings are driving white residential preferences. I'm going to let that marinate for a second because that is exactly what I was talking about. In the 2000s, the 2010s, you still have white people with the same mindset that they prefer segregation. And I cannot continue to stress to my people how we need to pull our heads out of the sand and realize that we do not have to continue to be assimilated into a society that is tolerating us because it's the law. If someone does not genuinely want to do something and it means abuse, discrimination, outrageous jail sentencing, mass incarceration, and the list goes on and on and on. I feel that we need to have a little bit more, high self-esteem when it comes to what it is that we want to do and who it is that we want to be. We can't continue to allow ourselves to be the repetitive punching bag, because we want so desperately to be merged in with individuals who, by and large, do not want to be, integrated into society with us. And as I was stating before, we need to think with our logical minds. We don't need to be emotional about this, because when we're being emotional about this situation, we are clouding our judgment, and we're not being logical to take a minute to say, does this situation make sense for us? My personal opinion on it is that I feel that we need our own separate communities, and the reason, years and decades and generations of trying to coexist, it has not worked. And I'm not saying that we need to gain control of our communities so that we will be the ones that is determining our destiny. We won't have people sucking and extracting the resources out of our community and then handing us crumbs, and we're still begging and scraping at the bottom of the totem pole to get a piece of what it is that we are providing for so many people. Whether we know it or not, Black people is providing an economy for so many communities. And we need to really take that into account, that all of the money that we are pushing into other communities, if we were just to keep that, if we were to first come together and stop being so afraid to exist with one another, because we have no problem existing with other people. If we come together and we aggregate our resources, we will begin to see vast changes. And people will not be in a position where they can discard us, where they can count us out, where they can come up with analytics and statistics and all these other things that is saying that, you know, within what, 30 years time, the next 3 decades or so, that we'll have zero wealth. I think we need to really get serious. And, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk tonight about us getting serious about our situation, getting serious about our condition. Because if we don't get serious about our situations and we don't, do a critical analysis of what it is that we're facing, I hate to say it, but there's a very big possibility that this data could be our reality. And we cannot allow that to happen. Now, really quickly, some of the things that we can do in the right now, because like I said, this is not going to be an overnight process. We're not going to wake up tomorrow and somehow these affluent communities are going to be functioning. But what we can do, as Ms. Arquay was saying with her cousin, he is, I think that we all have the capability to do that. We need to get with other people within the community, and we need to brainstorm and come up with ways that we can begin to build infrastructure for ourselves, because that is the main thing that we need. We need schools, hospitals, banks, things that make a society function. We're lacking that greatly. It's almost to the point where it's non-existent within our communities, because going to a hospital that is owned by someone else and providing an economy for their society and their group, that doesn't help you. You're going to always be at the bottom. And I think that's something that, for some odd reason, it seems that some of us are complacent with that, but that just won't do. Those numbers are reality. And I think that, as I stated before, we have to take that very seriously, and we have to begin to start doing things within the community that we're in right now to brainstorm and strategize ways that we are going to see to it that those numbers do not become a reality for us. If anybody wants to drop anything else in the chat before I end, if you have anything that you want to add. Patrice Thomas just came into the chat. She said, we are so used to using outside resources, we don't trust our own people to go higher. That is a profound statement that Patrice just made. We have trust issues among our own people, which is so disheartening, that we have trust issues among ourselves and among our own communities, but we're so trusting and so giving and so forgiving of people that, as I said before, do not have our best interests at heart. They come into our communities to basically exploit us. They take from the community. They don't give anything back to it. And, this is a discussion that's definitely going to have to, I'm going to have a part 2 for this, because there's so much more that I want to add to this conversation, but we're already at an hour. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, but definitely we need to continue this conversation, because there is more that I would like to add to this. I feel that this is something that is critical. And if we continue to turn a blind eye to the situations that we face, we're going to be responsible for our children inheriting extreme poverty and degradation. You know, the amount of homeless Black people within America is staggering. We'll talk about that in part two. But, you know, like I said, don't believe the hype. And I'm not saying this to discourage anybody. I'm not saying this to scare anyone. I'm trying to bring awareness to the situation because it is, you know, it's a critical problem. And as I stated before, we cannot allow this to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. And I just want to thank everyone for joining the conversation tonight, for bearing with me. Like I said, I'm not feeling the greatest, but I felt it very, very, very necessary to have this conversation, especially while it was so fresh on my mind and on my heart. Um, you know, I don't know if people can tell by now, but I am very, very sincere about advancing the community. I know what our potential is. You know, I know the history of the greatness that we come from, what we have contributed to this entire planet, and I just want us to return to greatness. I want us to be what it is that I know we can be. There's so many things that is out there to discourage us, but I want us to continue to keep our heads lifted up. I want us to know that we are capable of doing amazing things because we can definitely make it to the point that our children and everyone that will precede us can look back and say that our generation cared enough about them that we continue the fight so that they could live better. Um, if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, I highly encourage you do that. I am at Shelly Speaks One on Twitter, Facebook Shelly Speaks. My email is shellyspeakstruth@gmail.com. Shoot me an email about anything you may want to discuss. And, you know, once again, I just want to thank everyone for taking out the time to be here to have this conversation. I know we're all very, very busy, but it does my heart well that people come here and engage and, you know, contribute something to the conversation so that we can, you know, continue to uplift and build one another. So again, thank you to everyone for watching. Miss Okay, Patrice dropped another comment as I was closing out. She said, "We have to change our mind and come together. We are some of the only people who can't come together." Um, you know, I don't necessarily know if we can't. There's so much propaganda out there against, and when you've been put in a position where you can look at another group of people that in so many ways have been exalted above us, almost to a godlike status, and you look at the Black person on the side of you and you see poverty and you see degradation, you know, in your psyche, even if you're not trying to, in many ways, you just say to yourself, I want to get away from this. I want to go and assimilate myself into something that I feel is greater than me. And I think that we need to scale back that social engineering that makes us feel that someone else is better than us, because it's absolutely not true. And as I was stating before, there are so many things that we have contributed to civilization. I highly encourage people to study our history because it is so important. If you know that you come from greatness, your confidence will be boosted overnight, I promise you. So now I'm going to end it here. And once again, thank you to everyone for watching. I appreciate the support and the love, and I hope everyone has a good night. I will see you next Thursday at 8. We started late tonight. There were some issues. I'm not quite sure what that was all about, For some reason, YouTube was not allowing me to go live. Don't know why. But again, let's keep let's keep our backs up straight and let's keep our heads up high. Um, we can do great things together. So again, to everyone, thank you for watching and have a great night.